It doesn't drop bombs, it doesn't dogfight, it doesn't go supersonic, it doesn't feature stealth or perform vertical takeoffs. Yet the Boeing C-17 Globemaster III may be the most important military aircraft of the 20th century. Why? Because when something big and heavy needs to get halfway across the world really quickly, whether that's an M1 Abrams tank, an airborne infantry brigade, or emergency aid for a crumbling disaster zone, the C-17 is the plane that you call. It's a cargo jet, absolutely, but it's one that can land on gravel, back itself up without a tug, and drop an entire forward base from 30,000 feet. It's first in, last out, and it's even been crammed full of hundreds of people fleeing for their lives. And yet this icon of global airlift very nearly never happened. Its development was a mess, its funding was cut again and again, at times its future was hanging by a tiny thread. So how did the C-17 not only survive, but really ends up rewriting the rules of military logistics? Well, let's find out, shall we, with Chapter 1, Origins and Development. In the late 70s, the US Air Force airlift fleet experienced a striking leap between extremes. The hulking C-5 Galaxy, introduced in 1970, could haul almost anything, while the versatile C-130 Hercules, introduced in 1956, proved to be a bit of a tactical workhorse. Although each aircraft was a master of its domain, evidenced by their continued service, the middle child of the strategic airlifter family in both capabilities and age, the C-141 Starlifter, was increasingly falling short. Introduced in 1965, the Starlifter soon revealed its limitations. Its slender fuselage lacked the girth to accommodate the supersized hardware of modern warfare, and its extremely long takeoff distance relegated it to the less vital role of transferring many smaller items between fully established, concreted airbases. I.e., it was basically just a bit of a shit version of the C-5. George, who wrote this, says less capable. I improvise. It's just a bit worse, isn't it? Today's video is brought to you by Squarespace. I built my site using Squarespace years ago. I recently made another site using Squarespace, and it was even easier than it was years ago. They just keep making it easier for you to make a beautiful website. I have no design skills. My website looks great. The recent website I made, which I'm not going to mention the name of because right now it's a secret project, but it looks great. It was super easy to do. No design skills, no coding skills. Boom, beautiful website. There's something called Blueprint AI Builder. You answer a few questions about what you're making, and it builds the full site layout that's actually usable. It's not just a blank canvas. Second, there's analytics. It shows you where people are coming from, what they click on when they leave. Basically, what's working on your site and what's not. Plus, they've got email campaigns, they've got SEO stuff. They really got everything you need, whether you're building a business, a newsletter, a portfolio, whatever. Squarespace is where you must go. Go to squarespace.com/megaprojects for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the code MEGAPROJECTS and you'll save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. And now back to today's video. But what was needed instead was a jet that could bridge that gap. Sturdy enough to house plenty of tanks and heavy artillery, yet agile enough to land on short, rugged airstrips closer to the front lines. Thus, in November 1979, the Pentagon formalized its requirement for a replacement, and the CX program was born. Now, at this early stage, they were open to all ideas. For example, the notion of militarizing commercial jets like the 747 was floated, a sensible idea considering Boeing had designed the 747 to operate as a cargo aircraft and airlifter to hedge their commercial bets if there turned out to be no demand for large airliners. Likewise, they also considered bypassing the development of new aircraft altogether and simply ordering more C-5s. Although this wasn't really the best idea given the, land on short and rugged airstrips thing. But it really does show that they were open to pretty much all ideas. In the end, when everything was said and done, two proposals emerged as clear frontrunners: McDonnell Douglas's YC-15 prototype and Boeing's YC-14. The photographs made it apparent that the YC-15 was the winner. Also, we want to make clear that we didn't mix that up when we speak. Indeed, I had to read it twice and go back and take it again because I thought George had made an error, but he didn't. It's George. Reliable. Boeing absorbed McDonnell Douglas in 1997, and as a result, McDonnell Douglas's products eventually began carrying Boeing's name, hence our reference to the C-17 thus far. Following along? Absolutely. As for when it won the contract, that happened in August 1981. It was then dubbed the C-17 Globemaster III, continuing the legacy of Douglas's earlier C-74 Globemaster and C-124 Globemaster II, and its proper development began from now. Immediately, however, it hit turbulence. You see, the YC-15 was more of a trust us, Uncle Sam, we've got this technical demonstrator than a true prototype. To drop a letter from its name and become a proper aircraft, it would have to be made 12 feet taller, 50 feet longer, its engines would need to be doubled in number and slightly more powerful, and a whole host of even more advanced STOL, or short takeoff and landing, measures and systems would have to be implemented. Basically, despite YC-15 still being referred to as the prototype C-17 by many to this very day, the two were, despite their relations, totally different aircraft. The C-17's development timeline reflects that difference, with the first true prototype not flying until September 1991. That's 10 years after winning the contract and 18 months behind the Pentagon's own targets. That was bad timing too, because only a few months later, the even weaker and more frayed Soviet Union wound up totally collapsing, ending both the Cold War and many US politicians' appetite for $40 billion and counting projects that weren't hitting their targets. As a result, Congress set about the C-17 project with a well-worn and bloodied axe. Orders were slashed from 210 to 120 to 40, and then briefly to just 8. From 210. That's savage. At that point, the C-17 was ordering a drink in the last chance saloon. It was given 2 years to deliver results, or it was getting even more of that axe. In what was nothing short of a miracle, however, McDonnell Douglas pulled it off. Lethargic executives were given the boot, engineers had unfathomably large bonuses dangled in front of them, and factory workers had the caps taken off their overtime. As a result, the first production C-17 took to the sky in 1993, really at the 11th hour. From there, the rest is history. Orders rebounded first to 80, then to 120, then to 140, and when all said and done, 279 examples were produced before the final unit was delivered in 2013, with the production line shutting down 2 years later. Against all odds, the C-17 not only survived its turbulent birth, but thrived, becoming a cornerstone of the US Air Force and a real phoenix risen from the ashes. So, having said all of that, let's now move on, crack its cowling, and see what exactly makes this Leviathan tick, shall we? As we move into Chapter 2, Design and Technical Mastery. Alright, let's start with the basics. The C-17 is a 4-engine high-wing jet that measures 174 feet in length, has a wingspan of about 170 feet, and a tail that stands 55 feet high. To put those figures in familiar context, it's a bit larger than even the most stretched-out 737, it's a lot smaller than a 747, and it's vaguely in the same ballpark as a 787, specifically a smaller one like the Dash 8. As for the 4 engines, they are Pratt & Whitney F117PW100 turbofans, the military version of the PW2000s that found their way onto Boeing 757s and, oddly enough, Ilyushin IL-96s. Each engine produces roughly 40,000 pounds of thrust, providing enough power to propel a C-17 to a cruise speed of about 520 miles per hour, placing it in the same league as a commercial jet. However, it isn't just raw power that gives the C-17 its advanced reputation. It's the blend of heavy lift brawn with finesse and flexibility. The aircraft's cargo hold is essentially a flying warehouse. It's 88 feet long, 18 feet wide, 12 feet high. It's capable of accommodating 18 standard cargo pallets or various vehicles and troops. Its maximum payload is just over 170,000 pounds, which works out to be enough to haul a single M1 Abrams main battle tank, 2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, or 3 Stryker armored fighting vehicles. Or, if you prefer human cargo for your context, the C-17 can accommodate 134 passengers in airline-style seats bolted to the floor, or 102 paratroopers ready to jump. It can even be configured to carry 36 stretchered patients, along with all the medical staff and machines necessary to keep them alive during air and medical evacuation missions. Crucially, the C-17 can also deliver these loads to locations previously thought impossible for a jet of its size, thanks to its STOL capabilities. These capabilities are afforded by its high-lift wing with leading-edge slats and externally blown flaps, which force exhaust over the flaps for added lift. For those interested in the figures, it can take off and land on runways as short as 3,500 feet and only 90 feet wide. Wow. Not that it necessarily needs a conventional runway. In both test trials and real operations, C-17s have operated from dirt and gravel strips in remote areas as well as high alpine airfields. For example, one US exercise in Alaska saw a C-17 land on an icy runway above the Arctic Circle, delivering Stryker armored vehicles to a forward base. Capabilities like this are exactly what the US Air Force dreamed of back in the 1970s, a true middle ground between the heavy hauling ability of a C-5 and the "I'll land it where I want, you" capabilities of a C-130. Naturally, it also boasts a range of features to help it tackle rough terrain, beyond just the get on and off the ground ASAP approach. For example, its engines are equipped with thrust reversers that can help pivot up and over the wing, enabling the aircraft to back up under its own power. This is a significant advantage when landing in remote areas where aircraft tugs might not be available. And because we always appreciate an opportunity for a striking image, let it be known that its thrust reversers are so powerful that they can generate impressive vortexes on wet runways. Behold! To revisit its ability to land in remote locations, the C-17 also includes additional features that help it remain self-sufficient on the ground. The most notable of these is a fully built-in loading ramp and the ability to lower its rear landing gear for easier loading and unloading. No expense was spared on its avionics and flight systems either, with the flight crew having access to state-of-the-art technologies such as heads-up displays and quadruple redundant fly-by-wire controls that allow the aircraft to perform those demanding remote approaches both precisely and safely. Unlike older transports that often required crews of 4 to 6, the C-17 only needs 3 crew members to fly: a pilot, a co-pilot, and a loadmaster to manage the cargo. Service history. Now, a good airliner isn't judged solely by its brochure, it's measured by its performance in the real world, and the C-17 has been proving its worth ever since it rolled off the line. From combat drops and humanitarian airlifts to moments of sheer, chaotic heroism, it has done it all. Often first in, frequently last out, and ever so often absolutely rammed to the rafters, it's a plane that turns airfields into lifelines and empty cargo bays into miracles. Its first proper test came in 1999, during NATO's bombing campaign over a then disintegrating Yugoslavia. This was Operation Allied Force, and even though the C-17 had only just achieved operational status, it immediately flew more than half of NATO's strategic airlift sorties. It ferried troops, armor, and relief into the Balkans, even reaching remote or poorly equipped airfields where most aircraft of its size wouldn't dare to land. For a jet that had been almost cancelled a few years earlier, it made an impressive debut and served as a warning shot to all of its doubters. And then, of course, came the post-9/11 era. In Afghanistan, it proved its mettle almost overnight. As soon as the US captured Bagram Airfield, C-17s began landing with everything from tanks to tents, even though the runway was cracked, dusty, barely passable. The C-17 could fly non-stop from Germany, refuel mid-air, and drop pallets straight into the mountain valleys. And when US Special Forces needed an entire forward operating base airdropped from the desert in late 2001, it was the C-17 that pulled it off. Not with a flourish, but reliably, relentlessly, and with the kind of logistical brute force that only it can deliver. By 2003, during the invasion of Iraq, the C-17's role had only grown. In one of the most iconic missions of the war, 15 C-17s flew in formation to airdrop almost 1,000 tons from the 173rd Airborne into northern Iraq, the largest US combat airdrop since Vietnam. Within hours, C-17s were landing on the very strip those troops had searched, delivering Abrams tanks, artillery, and helicopters directly into the combat zone. This was the very embodiment of the strategic to tactical airlift concept. Depart from Italy, jump into Iraq, land on the same dirt strip, and bring the rest of the war machine along. But if you think the C-17's only strength is delivering violence at scale, well, think again. Its humanitarian record is arguably even more impressive. For example, after the 2010 earthquake in Haiti, it was among the first heavy aircraft on the ground. The C-17 delivered millions of pounds of supplies, flew out hundreds of injured civilians, and helped coordinate flight operations when the air traffic control tower had literally fallen over. Its crews relied on handheld radios and whiteboards to keep the airlift running, and run it did. Then, when the 2011 tsunami hit Japan, C-17s rushed in with generators, bottled water, and equipment to support the Fukushima nuclear cleanup. During the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, they delivered field hospitals and containment gear. In Hurricane Katrina, they flew out patients, brought in search and rescue teams, and acted as flying supply depots. And further still, in Somalia, Sudan, the Philippines, Pakistan, and more, they have been the difference between help arriving today or help just never arriving. And then there's Kabul. 2021, the most dramatic deployment in the C-17's history. As the Taliban closed in and thousands of Afghans flocked to the airport, a C-17 with the call sign Reach 871 took off with 823 people crammed into its hold, a new record for the aircraft. This wasn't planned. The crew simply saw how many lives they could save and said, "Get in." Over the following days, dozens of C-17s flew round-the-clock missions, sometimes taking off mere minutes apart. They ultimately evacuated over 120,000 people. It was the biggest humanitarian airlift since Saigon, and the C-17 was the tip of the spear. All in all, when considering its technical specifications and its service history, it is fair to call the C-17 a tidy bit of kit. This view was further supported by the fact that despite its troubled birth, the aircraft has maintained an excellent safety record, suffering only one fatal crash, which occurred in July 2010. Even when regularly pushed into less than ideal situations as part of its routine operations, it was safe. Moreover, even that sole fatal incident was later proven to be caused by pilot error, not any kind of shortcoming with the aircraft. Rivals and pretenders to the throne. Given its formidable capabilities and robust service record, how does the C-17 stack up against the other airlifters in the world, past, present, and emerging? The most obvious comparison is with its older, larger sibling, the Lockheed C-5 Galaxy. First flown in 1970, the C-5 is an absolute monster, plain and simple. At 247 feet long and boasting a payload capacity of 280,000 pounds, it dwarfs the C-17 and can haul 2 Abrams tanks or 6 light armored vehicles at once, effectively delivering double the payload of its newer, smaller sibling. But with the C-5, that weight comes with baggage. Fully loaded, the C-5 requires about 8,000 feet of pristine runway for takeoff when carrying heavy loads, and 5,400 feet when it has a more modest cargo complement. It's a globe trotter among major hubs, not something you send into a patch of gravel near a forward outpost. Reliability was an issue in the early years, with a typical crew complement of 7. Recent upgrades have given us the C-5M Super Galaxy, which features better engines and digital systems, but it remains a brute force hauler rather than a surgical tool. In operations, it's common to see the Galaxy move loads to large airfields where C-17s or C-130s then take over. So while the C-5 may lift more, the C-17 goes more places, and that's a critical distinction. On the other side of the old Cold War divide, the Russians field the Ilyushin Il-76, an old Soviet workhorse that has been flying since the 70s. It's slightly smaller than the C-17 and can carry between 93 and 130,000 pounds depending on the variant. Certainly respectable numbers, but not exactly groundbreaking stuff, and certainly less than what a C-17 can handle. Later models, like the Il-76MD-90A, introduced new engines and glass cockpits, yet the basic structure remains unchanged. It was built to land on snow, gravel, and ice just like the C-17, but overall its systems are more analog, and it required larger crew sizes, still needing both a navigator and a flight engineer on board. Its design language is a generation older. It's a rugged and proven platform, certainly, but advanced is not the word that describes it. If the C-17 is a modern athlete, fast, strong, and precise, the Il-76 is the past their prime Olympian who's still turning up at races and putting off having to get a day job. And then there's the Antonov AN-124, which surpasses the C-17 in sheer size and payload. With a capacity of over 260,000 pounds, the AN-124 is frequently called upon to move some of the biggest loads in the world: turbines, tanks, even locomotives. However, it remains a niche aircraft that doesn't perform tactical landings, and its production has long been dormant. Essentially, it's the Soviet/Russian/Ukrainian C-5 equivalent. It's a complicated paternity, don't worry about it. So it makes sense to discount it for our purposes and focus on more equitable comparisons, such as China's Xi'an Y-20. And this raises many an eyebrow because it so closely resembles a C-17. It features the same high wings, T-tail, rear ramp. It's nearly a carbon copy, except for a few details here and there. It entered service in 2016, and it is clearly designed to mimic the C-17's mission profile. However, there's a noticeable gap between inspiration and execution. China has faced engine development hurdles, with early Y-20s using less capable Russian engines before switching to domestic WS-20s. While its performance is steadily improving, it hasn't been battle-tested in the same way as the C-17. The copycat approach is itself a testament to the Globemaster's success, as imitation is, after all, the sincerest form of flattery. In the end, many aircraft excel in one or two areas where the C-17 might fall short. Some can lift more, some cost less, and a few are newer. Yet none seem to combine the unique blend of heavy payload capacity, long range, rapid deployment, rough field landing ability, and combat-proven versatility like the C-17. It's one of those rare aircraft that can airdrop paratroopers one day, land a tank on a gravel field the next, and then pivot quickly to evacuating disaster victims or support satellite launches. That kind of flexibility is not easy to design, and it still hasn't been replicated. This is why, decades after its first flight, the C-17 remains the gold standard, and will likely continue to be well into the future. And speaking of the future, legacy, future outlook. Now, today the C-17 remains widely regarded as the backbone of modern strategic airlift for the US. In service for over 25 years, it has earned a reputation that few military aircraft enjoy, and that's near universal praise from those who rely on it. While airlift might not offer the glamour of fighters or bombers, ask any Army brigade commander or disaster relief coordinator, and you'll hear that the C-17 has been a game changer. It has enabled the US and its partners to address crises with unprecedented speed and scale, arguably reshaping military logistics in the post-Cold War era. No longer is it necessary to spend months building up forces via slow sea lift or to be constrained by large air bases for heavy cargo delivery. The C-17 makes it possible to deploy a heavy force halfway around the world in just a matter of days and even sustain that force from the air if needed. That capability has undeniably influenced strategic thinking, for example, enabling rapid deployments to forward areas like never before. On the international stage, the C-17's legacy is one of cooperation. Recognizing the aircraft's utility, several US allies seized the opportunity to acquire their own. The UK's Royal Air Force was the first foreign customer. They initially leased 4 C-17s in the early 2000s before purchasing and eventually operating 8. The Royal Australian Air Force also acquired 8, while Canada operates 5. Other users include NATO's Strategic Airlift Capability, a consortium of 12 nations that collectively maintains a pool of 3 C-17s, as well as individual countries such as India, 11, Qatar, 4, the UAE, 6, and Kuwait, 2. In total, approximately 275 C-17s are in operation worldwide, 223 in the US and 50 with other nations. This relatively small global fleet is especially valuable since Boeing closed the production line in 2015, making these jets a finite resource. Countries that possess them plan to continue flying them for decades, while those that missed out now have little chance of obtaining one, unless they can find a used aircraft on the market, and good luck with that one, people don't want to let them go. There have even been rumors and lobbying efforts about possibly restarting C-17 production due to demand, but that would be a major undertaking, and it hasn't materialized as of this year, 2025. And honestly, if you want our 2 cents, we don't think that's happening. Looking ahead, the C-17 is poised to remain dominant throughout the 2030s and likely into the 2040s. The US Air Force is committed to keeping the fleet upgraded by investing in new communication systems, improved avionics, and periodic overhauls to ensure longevity. Although airframes naturally have finite lifespans, heavy transports can remain operational for 30, 40, even 50 years when properly maintained. Just consider the C-130 as evidence. It provided 52 years of service, and the N-1170G, which rolled off the production line in 1957 and is still in service nearly 70 years later. Turning back to the C-17, it's important to note that there is no direct replacement currently on the drawing board. While there are concepts for future airlifters, such as advanced blended wing body designs that could offer greater efficiency or even exploring hybrid airships for heavy lift, nothing is nearing production at this time. Which means that for now, and for the foreseeable future, the C-17 isn't just holding the line, it is the line. A jet born in controversy and nearly scrapped before its first flight now stands as the benchmark by which all others are measured. And until someone builds something better, it'll keep flying into danger, flying out with hope, and doing the kind of heavy lifting that no one else can. Because when the world needs something moved fast, far, and with no excuses, there's only one jet for the job. Thank you for watching.